Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. I'm a concierge high performance psychologist providing luxury level support to executives, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and athletes. With me today, I have Todd Karges. He has a background in project management and building agile development mindsets. He is a transformation and change management practitioner and a leadership development coach. I have Kevin Wash. He's a coach, mentor, author, trainer, and speaker, running a consultancy business specializing in sales for international property development. And I have Rob Upchurch. He develops and produces branded podcasts for business leaders and professional organizations. The question I have for the three of you today: how did you figure out your niche or your audience?
I think one of the challenges of knowing your niche and audience is to let go of your own ego. You need to listen, you need to ask questions and listen to the answers. And the one thing I found out is sometimes what your qualifications say you're good at isn't necessarily going to be your best niche or your best audience. The best example I can give, I was in a restaurant once and a waiter spent 5 minutes explaining every single cut of meat on the menu to me. He then proceeded to recommend exactly what I should eat and why I should eat it. I politely declined and he said, "Why don't you want that?" And I said, "Because I'm a vegetarian." Now, if he'd have actually taken 1 minute to ask me a question, he would have known his audience. And I think sometimes that's the thing that people miss. Ask the question, listen, and then that will help you find where your niche is going to be.
There's two things that come to me as you say that, Kevin. The first one is that there are so many different audiences there. And I guess maybe one of the universal truths in discovering your audience is that not everybody is going to want to buy what you're selling. And that's okay, because there's someone who will. At least I hope that that's true, because I'm still in the process of discovering who my audience is, and I'm trying a whole bunch of new things out.
Right, because you recently pivoted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Rob, you work in this space.
Yes. Yeah. I think about audience every single day. To Kevin's point, audience comes down to who can you serve and how do you do that? To the point of him being a vegetarian, if, like he said, if the waiter had taken 1 minute, the waiter could have pivoted and been better served his audience. What I was taught to do in radio was actually think of one specific person, not broad demographics, 35 to 45 or male or female or college educated or not, but literally create a persona of one single person that you are doing your service for, and use that person that you've created to think about how you can serve others.
When I started doing this, so we're talking 15 years ago now, I was like, everyone could benefit from talking to me. And for me to actually realize just because everybody can doesn't mean that everybody will, and that everybody should. And I think the other thing that people don't think about, you have to pick an audience that can afford to pay you, or you have to say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go find grants or something. Yeah. It's great to say, I want to help people who need my help. Awesome. How are you going to pay your bills?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ronnie. If you're doing this professionally, helping people is wonderful. It's a byproduct of what we do. But at the end of the day, I'm doing this for the economics of my business. So that's a key part of it. So for me to connect with an audience, I've got to deliver something that they will benefit from, which overall the company will benefit from, and then they'll pay me to come back again. And I think one of the key points of doing this, it's actually talking to people and not talking at people. At this moment, it's a very popular thing for people to pivot into the training genre. They can go and do a 5-minute online course and they get a certificate and they train. But all they do is they just talk at people about things that they know, which may have no relevance or interest whatsoever to their audience. So they just lose the audience.
There's a curiosity that's coming to me as you're saying that, Kevin. It was particularly around what you said around the economics of your business. And I guess it's the difference between a niche and an audience. From a marketing perspective, my audience can be very, very wide, but my niche with respect to what I'm doing could be quite a bit narrower. It could be a subset of that audience. A broad audience might reveal additional niches that I didn't think I had.
I agree. You can have the broader audience, but your core audience, the people that you are really, really serving and meeting in the middle with, are the people who are going to directly benefit from whatever it is you do. I'll give a shout out to one of my clients, Mike Coffey of the Good Morning HR podcast. Not only does he talk about HR topics that HR leaders need to know. Every episode is available for recertification credits for HR professionals. That not only do they get that high level knowledge based thing, but they still get that thing that they can take away and check a box and that accomplishes something very real in their life.
You bring up a good point, Rob, because one thing that I think that people, when they're looking for the niche, don't think about is, what am I offering? What am I bringing to the table? It's a lot like when people are looking for someone to date. They all make these lists of, this is what I want my partner to have. But if I ask the question, well, what are you bringing? What would your partner be looking for? I get deer in the headlights. And I think the same is true in business. When you ask people, okay, well, what are you bringing? That's going to help define your niche too.
Yeah, I think also specializing, so narrowing the field down. You can say, I'm a trainer, I train salespeople, which is a pretty broad spectrum, really. One of my specialities is dealing with different cultures. I'm currently in Egypt, and the reason that I'm here is because they wanted somebody with experience in the Arabic culture, which I have a lot of experience in that field. Combined with the fact that I'm a sales trainer, I kind of tick the boxes. So my niche is really in unusual markets. So I find that where I go looking for my business, I'm very rarely quoting or pitching against other people. And that for me is a really good niche to work in.
So that's interesting, because the wisdom that I've heard, sorry, this isn't to suggest that what you're saying is wrong, of course, but rather the counterpoint that comes to me is perhaps people who are already within a market or have discovered an audience where you also can add value. What you're then doing is not having to test whether or not it's a viable economic market, because there's people that are there. It just means that your competition perspective is a little different than what you're describing.
You have to be better at explaining what you do and why you're different.
Exactly. It'll hone those skills necessarily. You get really good at the elevator pitch when that's the case.
Sure. It comes down to numbers at the end of the day as well. It's a pretty cutthroat industry, this. And you're as good as the numbers that you deliver. You know, I start every client that I work with, I start as a cost. And it depends how long it takes me from being a cost to moving on to being an asset, and then becoming a team member, and then an ex-consultant, because my cycle is finished. That's kind of how it works, really.
Yeah, to the point of having niches. I mean, in podcasting, we talk about the riches are in the niches. It's about being very, very specific in serving like such a specific audience that not only will they show up once, they'll show up every week. Just taking everyone's favorite podcast topic, which is true crime. There's a million true crime podcasts out there. If you told me this is a podcast all about true crime in Texas, I may seek that out before just the random podcast that covers any case they can find on Wikipedia. It's all about finding what is specific about your audience, but also how can you leverage your own knowledge to serve that audience.
And there's different ways to break it down, because I have a lot of people who will say to me, well, what's your niche? And I'm like, well, I have a psychographic. There's a type of person who hires me. They may work in a myriad of different industries, but there's a type of person. And it took me a long time to realize I don't have to go after this tiny group of people that work in this industry. I can go after the type of person that hires someone like me. And that was so much more rewarding to me, because then I realized, oh, I'm not leaving money on the table with all of these people that are in these other places, but it's still a niche because it's a type of person.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great perspective. And it's really healthy, because it's broad and narrow at the same time. It allows you to be a specialist without having to worry about specialization in your audience.
The one challenge with it is I can't buy a mailing list of people who are like this. That's not a thing. And so it's harder to find them, because I know who they are, but they're not lawyers who work in New York. Like it's not that easy. So it is a little bit more challenging in that way. But I think that people worry so much about, I can work with anybody, I don't want to not get paid, that they don't figure out, what do I do? Who do I do it for? And how do I let that person know and then share that value? Those are kind of the parts that goes into it.
I think also, if you deliver a service that connects with your audience and it benefits whoever it is that's paying you, the source of my work always comes from recommendations. I might write posts and write blogs and promote things this way, but I don't really market myself or my services. But people kind of know who I am. And that way, the one thing that I never get involved with arguing about my fees. Because generally people will know, they'll think, yeah, the guy's good. It's a good company. They're expensive, but they're good. And I can take that all day long. That's a great place to start any form of negotiation, good and expensive.
The only challenge, I guess, for me on that is that because there's so much confidentiality involved in the work that I do, if someone says, oh, do you work with so-and-so? I'm like, I can't tell you that.
Yes.
Whether I do or not, I can't tell you that. And my clients often won't even admit that I work with them. So I don't want people who don't get referrals to feel like, oh, I'm not doing a good job, I don't get referrals. If you work in the kind of business like I do, you're not going to get them. People have to kind of know you exist. And I get referrals from the trusted advisors. That's who reaches out to me and says, oh, hey, maybe have a conversation with her, and not because they need a shrink, just because they need someone to talk to. I'm going to cut us off there, but this is a really important conversation. I don't think people have enough. So thank you for having it with me. And I look forward to speaking to each of you again very soon.